Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. I'm so happy to see you all. My name is Pooja, the founder of Boundless Awareness. We create anti-oppression curriculum and facilitate it. And with me today is a guest that I have been waiting all year to speak to, Sunu Chandy, social justice activist, poet, civil rights attorney, working with Democracy Forward, an organization that has a coalition of over 250 organizations with 800 over 800 lawyers working for them. Such fabulous work that you do. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome, and I would love to hand it over to you to give a more detailed introduction of your social justice work, your work at Democracy Forward, any of that stuff. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the energy that you put into, highlighting different areas of the work and connecting with a range of communities. As you mentioned, I'm a senior advisor at Democracy Forward, and just to clarify, we have almost 100 people working with us, but we have put together some really important infrastructure to gear up for what's ahead in January. Democracy Forward was started during the first Trump administration to fight back against the harms and to stop the harms and slow down the harms. And that's how I came to know them. When I was legal director at the National Women's Law Center, we brought cases together. And so I joined them a year ago because so many of these fights were continuing in the state level and on a range of fronts with really extremist organizations bringing cases against DEI, like we're going to talk about. But now we're in this moment where some of those people are going to be going back into our federal government and really creating so much trouble that we'll need to stop and slow down. And so Democracy Forward has created an infrastructure called Democracy 2025, where we are partnering with hundreds of organizations and attorneys to make sure that we are planning together and collaborating, making sure there aren't gaps, and making sure that we're not duplicating efforts unnecessarily. So my colleagues have put together a really important infrastructure that went months before the election in case we needed it. Of course, here we are. And so I just kudos to all of my colleagues who really did a lot of work, planning work, which is now coming to bear so that we can have these conversations that are so necessary.
I might be jumping the gun a little bit here, but I know so many people are um, really interested in getting active. And is there a way for people to become active with Democracy Forward? Or how, or do you have recommendations of how people
Yeah.
can get involved as individuals?
Yep. As individuals, I would say please look at the Democracy Forward website. You can sign up to get email updates. If you're with a nonprofit or advocacy group, there's ways to get connected in with the specific issue areas that we're working on. And we also now have merch, which is really fun, where you can support the organization and also check out the t-shirts and tote bags and those kinds of items for your holiday giving. And that's a way to support us and also sort of support and support and represent for this really important mission of making sure that we have rule of law and making sure that we have integrity in our systems.
Yeah, indeed. And I will be giving you all that linked to the merch store towards the end of today. Okay, so on this LinkedIn Live, we talk about everyday equity, how people can make a change, and our guests come on to give inspiration to other people. So I want to first talk about your anti-oppression journey. How does anti-oppression work come into your life? How did you start on this journey? Why is it meaningful to you? Yeah, let us in.
Oh my goodness. I think I first became politicized during high school. My family um, belonged to Society of Friends and Quakers, and there was a lot of social justice activism. And I had a lot of mentors who showed me about, ways to get involved. I was an intern at American Friends Service Committee and learned a lot about both globally and domestically all the need for social change. And then I went to Earlham College, which is in Richmond, Indiana, um, and they had a Peace and Global Studies program and a Gender and Women's Studies program. And so again, I read so many wonderful books and had a wonderful student organizations, co-founded the Women of Color organization, and just had a lot of communities that helped me to evolve my own thinking about what needs to happen.
Mhm.
And it could be a range of issues. There's always anti-racist work to be done. There's women's rights, there's LGBTQ plus rights, disability justice, immigrant rights. I could have gone into work in any of these areas because they're all so fundamentally connected. And we know that if people come for one of us, they come for all of us. And the one thing that I felt heartened about in the first Trump administration is that I felt like groups came together more and supported each other because we were all under attack in ways. And I am always heartened to see that sort of solidarity again. And I hope that we have that because we need to have that.
Mhm.
So through my different experiences, I went to law school at Northeastern Law School, a public interest focused school, and was able to complete co-ops and internships to learn about women's rights, labor law, labor and employment law, and ended up going into initially employment law, labor and employment law, and spent 15 years at EEOC,
Mhm.
Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, suing companies who they engage in discrimination and creating policy changes on behalf of the federal government. So before law school, I didn't know that the federal government was involved in these sorts of cases to bring policy change and relief for the victims who suffered that. But that's actually sort of where I spent the bulk of my legal career.
Mhm. Amazing. And how about your the background of, your parents from Kerala,
Yeah.
that background of being, first generation, growing up here, how did that impact your thoughts on social justice or how your path should be? What was the effect of that?
Well, I'm so glad you named that. And I was actually introducing someone at a poetry event, and I saw that her bio had the daughter of immigrants. And I said to her, I added that to my bio during the last Trump administration because immigrants were so under attack. And we began to see that again, even during the campaign. And we see that racism has become emboldened in many places. And so there's already a concern with Asian Americans often being seen as perpetual immigrants, even when, especially on the West Coast, you can see this. Families have been here for generations, right? So much history here. And shout out to SADA, South Asian Archives and Digital Archives Group, because they have put out a really beautiful book detailing the history, the decades of history of
Mhm.
South Asian Americans in this country. And that's really important to name. Um, so my parents came from Kerala and I was born in this country, but many people will still look at us and see us as foreigners. And when you have a moment where there's increased, xenophobia and bias against people who are even perceived to be immigrants, that is a problem. And that needs to be, fought in so many ways. But I am concerned very much about, we know that immigration and immigrants will be one of the first areas to see a lot of troubling changes and harms. And so, in those moments, I feel like it's very important to name immigrant identity and to lean into that. And so, that is really, really crucial. So, thank you for raising that.
Yeah, I think about solidarity so much, between uh, skin colors, between genders, between generations. And can w- can you talk a little bit more about, and maybe this also kind of maybe ties into Transgender Law Center and also Democracy Forward, but like the work that both of these organizations do to build a solidarity between groups, because as we know, there is such an intentional effort by the mainstream and ruling class to make sure that there are divides between the marginalized groups, so to break the solidarity. And there's a variety of tactics used, even this affirmative action case from last year. So yeah, talk about work that you have seen or that you do on this level of building solidarity between groups that maybe you think aren't close, but in fact hold many of the same values.
Yes, I mean, this is something that I've really been heartened to see over the years that I've been working in social justice and public interest lawyering. I was so heartened to see that LDF, NAACP LDF, Legal Defense Fund, wrote such a beautiful amicus brief in the Scrimetti case, the case about
Yeah.
transgender healthcare and healthcare for young people. And it was twofold. One, it was we are a legacy civil rights racial justice group, and we are against discrimination being in our laws, period, full stop. But it was also this impacts our community. There are Black trans young people who are impacted. And I think that it is really important to have both of those points out there, because for many years it was just as an ally, just as solidarity, right? But then when you actually name that these issues are super important for each of these organizations because our identities overlap, it's all the more powerful, right? So
Mhm.
that's definitely a way that I've seen changes. And I think it's because who's in these organizations, right? When you have people who embody these overlaps, you're less able to deny them. And
Mhm.
I really so happy to see so many LGBTQ organizations today led by Black women. There's several of them. And so you cannot actually divide our movements and our causes in ways that has been done for so long.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the Transgender Law Center. I started to be a board member back when I was at the National Women's Law Center, partially because there were so many attacks on trans people in quote unquote in the name of women's rights. And so I'm so happy that the Law Center and other very sort of traditional, long time existing women's rights, gender justice groups have been on the forefront of saying, not in our name. That is not the case, right? We are not concerned about this sort of made up harm that they're alleging, when the truth is it's usually trans folks and LGBTQ folks who are more prone to be assaulted or sexually assaulted or face violence. And that is what's borne out. And when entities or cities have greater protections for LGBTQ folks, including restrooms that align with gender identity, there's no uptick in sexual assault. That is
Yeah.
not true. And so sort of rebutting those harms, and kudos to Democracy Forward for representing National Women's Law Center in many, many Title IX amicus briefs in
Mhm.
the last several months to uphold the Title IX regulations that provide these protections, right? And so it's important that all of these organizations are together in making that point. And, so I have stayed on the board of the Transgender Law Center because, frankly, I learned so much from them about equity. And I'll just give the latest example of what I saw is when they had their annual event. They had different ranges of money that you can donate for
Mhm.
organizations. And then they said, whatever amount you give, your little size of your little ad will be the same, because that's what equity means. And I'd never seen that before, right? You see that kind of, you get a page, you get half a page.
Yeah.
They're actually embodying this sort of equity in all of their dealings. And, I can say for Democracy Forward, one of the reasons I was intrigued to come here, in addition to all of the great litigation work, is the way their postings, the language of their postings. It said, here's what we're looking for.
Mhm.
You don't have these precise qualifications, but you can do this job based on your experience and background. Please apply.
Yes.
Right? Again, I had never seen that kind of language before, and it opens a door, which is the exact opposite of the postings that I saw before from many, many
Yeah.
organizations that say things like the successful candidate will come from top ranked law schools. What does that mean? Right? Like, what is the number? Who are you keeping out and who are you inviting in? And so you are sending those messages of micro inclusion or exclusion in
Mhm.
all of your documents, right? And if you're not privy to it because of a particular status or a privilege, or not noticing that, then you need to have other people on your team who will show you those barriers and work to remove them. And
Mhm.
that obviously fits right into sort of creating greater access and inclusion and belonging.
Yes. 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 I think I often say to my clients, people tend to think in the extremes well, if we change our job description to not just explicitly say we only want like top law school or to Ivy League or whatever it might be, or 15 years of experience, and anything less we're really not going to, then we're going to get all these applicants that don't fit. And that's almost never the case. I mean, you have already a self-selected group of people who are going to be looking at this job posting.
Right. And also, I mean, other areas that are really important are, for some of your operations job, do you need a college degree? Right? Like, are you actually thinking about the job you have in mind and the skills needed for it? Because that's how you
Right.
open a door with hiring, right?
Yes.
Instead of narrowing it. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Brilliant. I want to leave enough time. We have plenty of time, but I want to leave enough time because I did say that you are a poet.
Thank you.
And this is Sunu's book, My Dear Comrades, a book of poetry, some beautiful, beautiful activist poetry, just really moves you. And we're going to take some time to kind of go through some poems here today. I'd love for you to pick one out and let us know what it means to you, and any background information that you feel comfortable sharing with us. Of why you chose a poem, how you wrote it, where the inspiration comes from, if you feel comfortable doing that.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll read one from the book and then maybe a newer one that was published more recently. I'm going to read one that I often read because it really is top of mind because of the oral argument yesterday in Scrimeti, and just thinking about all the young people who are facing unknowns. Thankfully, many have family support, some do not. But even if the family supports you and your doctors are aligned with you, there are some states who are trying to take away right to hormone therapy and puberty blockers and these sort of treatments that are really, really important and helpful and life-saving. And so I hope people sort of push against the misinformation that's causing these laws to crop up, and to actually get to know folks and how this medical care is really important. So this is a poem from a long time ago. It's called Too Pretty. October on the subway, roses at my side, kids being loud. One skinny girl with a cap and a pretty smile gets up to give me her seat and takes this chance to sit on her friend's lap. I read the paper and look over at these girls, so free and easy, they're laughing, laughing. I look at the pink, pink roses and how I say I'm not a romantic, how this whole roses thing is going to ruin my reputation against romance. I watch the girls, I watch the skinny girl in boys' clothes and pretty smile flirt with all the other girls, so free and easy, they're laughing, laughing. And the man next to me, he is also watching, watching. The man next to me, he leans over and says to me, hey, miss, that's too pretty to be a boy, right? As if somehow that thought disgusts him and he wants agreement about his disgust. And I'm just relieved he knows I'm not a pretty boy. So I just shrug and I say nothing because I'm still afraid. Afraid to say, what does a she look like? What does a boy look like? What does too pretty look like? And what is your problem exactly? I don't know whether his disgust is he thinks girls who look like boys should be beat up, or boys who look like girls should be beat up, because we know they both are. I only know I was relieved he didn't know my pink, pink roses were for a girl, and somehow I have the safety of passing. And I think to myself, y'all sitting there laughing, laughing, y'all sitting there on your sixth grade girlfriend's lap, so free and easy, laughing, laughing. Be safe, my handsome girls. Be safe, my pretty boys. Yeah. I read that recently, and the person said, that sounds like a love poem. And I was like, it absolutely is, right? Just,
Yeah, that's very beautiful. It's very moving.
yeah. And I thought I would share a new piece on your point about immigrants and immigration and our identities as Asian Americans. This was just published by Mid-Atlantic Review by Day 8, and they nominated it for a Pushcart Prize, which I actually didn't know much about that. but apparently literary journals, they go through sort of what they've published for a particular time period and nominate some of their pieces. So
Yeah.
this one is linked on my website, but it ties to one of the questions you were asking.
Excellent.
Being and belonging, walking while Asian American. It was an extrovert's dream Saturday. After spending the morning sitting on the newly built porch at a friend's home, and the 3 years old's refusal to share his stuffies, not his Diney, Sharky, Fishy, or Puppy, but insistence that I acknowledge each of them and him playing with them. And after we gave him a new happy birthday box of flesh colored crayons, imagine it, there are 24 skin tones now. And after we took almost nothing from their yard sale except one lovely wire basket, mostly to mark the memory of that gorgeous September perfect weather day, after all of that, we stopped by a DC street fair. And as we got closer to the street fair, there were cars honking, police directing traffic, and overflowing crowds on the sidewalk. My teen daughter and I got out to walk and meet our friends since we only had a short window of time to say hello before my friend's cocktail dress required 40th birthday party that evening. As we were rushing along, there was an older, possibly intoxicated man with two women friends in front of us on the sidewalk. We soon observed this was the kind of seemingly drunk man who commented out loud on everything. And when we passed by, he began to say, "They're walking so fast, so fast, so fast, I'm going to follow them." And he began to trace us closely. And then he began to say, "What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? Hey, miss, what's your name?" And before I could decide whether or how to engage, in the midst of our rushing, this turned into, "Oh, okay, so you don't speak English? Okay, so you don't speak English. I guess you don't speak English." And if that wasn't enough, he went into a full fake Chinese mocking word sounds. Those very sounds I had not heard since my own Midwest American childhood. But this time, my daughter was with me. Her face told me she was startled and possibly scared. And I didn't turn around and I didn't say, "Stop it. Stop it right there. No one harasses me or my Asian American child." I said to her quietly and plainly, "You know what? Let's keep on. Let's keep on walking." And later in the car, when we debriefed, my daughter said I wanted to cuss him out. And I said, "I get that." She said that was so super racist. And I said, "Yes." She said he was probably on something. I said, "You're probably right." I continued, "It's hard to know how to engage in these moments. My goal is always to diffuse instead of escalate." When I asked if she knew what escalate means, she said, "To throw gas on the fire." And it was the best definition I had ever heard. And then I told her about the long ago time when the white attorney boys in 1998 in NYC told me they could, in fact, keep sexually harassing the white attorney girl in the office and talk about her body every single time she walked into the library where I too was sitting. Because, as they said, "I don't know where you come from, but in this country we have freedom of speech." Upon hearing that legal theory, my 13-year-old with zero law school training suggested they go back to school because, as she said it, that's actually not what freedom means.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Gosh, we are so lucky to have you read this. And I know that's not printed in your book here, but that's just gorgeous.
It's available online. You can link to it on my website, or you can just search "Walking While Asian American." Sue
Brilliant.
Chandy, because it was just recently published. So I'm glad.
Yes, yes, and congratulations. Poetry, I would love to hear what it means to you, but it is such a um, lightning rod of an access point, to get involved. I mean, it's not it's just one of so many tools that we have to move our hearts and to move ourselves into action. I'd love to hear what it means for you.
Yeah, I was writing poetry for many years since high school, and then I took classes in Brooklyn, many places, 92nd Street Y, and with different organizations like Asian American Writers Workshop and Cave Canem, different groups that support writers. And then someone suggested that I should get an MFA in poetry, which just sounded weird to me. But then I looked into it and I saw there were evening classes and I could do it part-time. And I ended up doing that in 2013. So I had just a really fun program at Queens College, one of the CUNY programs, and with professors including Kamiko Hahn. And she's actually going to be speaking at the Folger Theater in DC on December 10th, and I get to be in conversation with her, which is
Oh my
really
gosh.
exciting next week. So yes, I have tried to keep poetry in my life even as the lawyering continues, and
Mm.
I really enjoy working in both of these spaces.
Yeah. I have all the ways that people can get in touch with you. The merch store is store.democracyforward.org. Get some good holiday merch for people and support an incredible organization. And it's at Sunu Chandy and all the socials. I want to loop back to one thing in our last few minutes, and it's we were actually talking about it right before we got on the air. Is people's concerns about DEI work. There is a report from earlier this summer from Democracy Forward on safeguarding and securing DEI. It's a great report. It's easily on the website, democracyforward.org. Go download it, read it. And as I was reading it, some of the things that were coming up for me is a lot of my clients are not afraid. I feel like a lot of people ask me, what's going to happen? And I feel like, one, we've been here before, so we know how bad it was and like how to predict what can happen. But also, we're less jarred now. We're less scared. When that executive order came out in the first administration, everyone was like, oh, we don't know how to abide by this. And it's like, it doesn't really affect most people. I mean, unless you're getting federal funding or you're really like contracted with the federal government. So can you talk a little bit about this great report that kind of just like puts it in context and reinforces the reality on the ground and not the like scare tactics that have been used?
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. So, after the university admissions decision, some of our opponents with extremist organizations brought dozens and dozens of cases in many different spaces. So, in healthcare and workplace and education. And so we cataloged those cases to really try to show many of them were dismissed on procedural grounds, many of them were settlements, and very, very few of them actually ended up in decisions that changed any of the law. There's some federal government programs where they were some difficult decisions, and those are, continuing. But in many spaces, the work of diversity, equity, inclusion is legal, is necessary, and needs to be explored and kept at the forefront so that we can have the kind of society that we want to have. And even as some of those extremists go into the government and may change sort of how some of the agencies are operating, all the more reason for the corporate sector, philanthropy, and all of us to be sort of united in staying bold in terms of why these programs are important. And, I always say if it is a program that is particularly for one race and leaves out other individuals, it should be discussed with a lawyer because those are sort of more difficult to legally defend. And so that does require some care and some nuance. But the vast majority of DEI related programs are removing barriers. They're pipeline programs, they're mentoring programs, they're not anything that are remotely near any sort of legal concern or liability. And so I just encourage everyone to keep on with the good fight and make sure that, your employees are being supported and your clients are being supported, because this is what people want, right? This is very much, if you look at the polls, the statistics and all of that, you can see this is what employers want. This is what corporations want. This is what employees want when they look for work. And this is what our communities need. So I hope that people stay strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the best way to get the best people for when you have the inclusion and belonging and to reduce turnover. I mean, it just makes sense across all boards. You have a lot of fans, by the way, in the comments. One is Nadia Garib. Thanks, Sunu, for sharing yourself and insights. You've always been such an inspiration. Good to see and hear you.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yes. And people are really digging your poetry. So
we're wrapping up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to thank you so much for your time today. You're fabulous. There's so much more to explore. We're going to link to all of the merch website, where to find your poem, Transgender Law Center, how to donate there. We're going to link to all of it underneath. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Take care.